There's a move in football, and I'm talking about American football here, where the player with the ball is running towards an opponent. And in order to avoid a tackle, they throw their head one way and then move their body another. This is called misdirection, and it can be very effective in avoiding a tackle. So today we're going to talk about misdirection in communication. Now, I'm not talking about the more toxic defenses like gaslighting, reverse attack, deny, deflect, things like that, but rather how couples get locked into communication patterns of misdirection together where they end up going down a rabbit hole or avoiding the very topic or the very thing that they need or want to talk about. So, misdirection in communication with couples. That's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Trauma-Free Relationship. I'm Tom Philp, your host. And as a therapist, I've spent over 10,000 hours helping couples work through their trauma so they can repair ruptures, heal their wounds, and communicate from a place of wholeness and connection. Let's get started. Okay, as I mentioned at the outset, this happens a lot. I see this a ton with couples where they come in and they tell me that they got into a rupture during the past week and the conversation broke down and disconnection continued and maybe they avoided each other for a few days or even a few hours at a time, tried to calm down because things had escalated and they never really repaired or resolved what was actually going on or what they intended to talk about. And so I talk about going down the rabbit hole or how they can't stick to the subject. And that's what I mean when I say misdirection in communication. This is a little bit different than necessarily defensiveness. I see couples that do this even if they're not caught in a cycle or even if they are not escalated at the moment or defensive. They can still have a communication pattern that breaks down and moves them further away from their intended subject and not closer to it. So with that in mind, let's walk through some different kinds of misdirection in communication. And I see this play out, as I said, where one partner might come to the other partner with an issue and say, hey, this happened, I'd like to talk about this. Or they might be sitting together and talking and they come upon a problem they need to be able to solve together. So it can start a variety of ways in the relationship. But then something begins to happen where their communication style tends to pull them further apart and away from the subject as opposed to being able to empathize, validate, and stick to the subject at hand in order to be able to problem solve together. So one of the ways I've noticed misdirection in communication is through storytelling. Now, this happens where one partner wants to completely retell the story and add context or be able to walk through the entire event again. And in doing so, the problem with this is that the partner can get completely lost in the details, or the partner then can get pulled into the story and start arguing about series of events that happened in that story. So now they have moved completely away from the original subject and they're caught up in a story where one partner was trying to, provide context enough to lead to a point, but now they're both fighting over the series of events. Well, this didn't happen that way, or this happened then, or so on and so forth, and it completely distracts them. They end up going down the proverbial rabbit hole and away from their intended subject. An example of this is my mom, bless her heart. Growing up, she loved to talk. She was a big talker. She loved people. I got my love of people from her, but she was a big storyteller in the sense that she couldn't just get right to a point. So she'd come in and she'd say, "You're not going to believe who I saw in the grocery store just now." And we in the family would be gathered in a den, and we'd say, I don't know, who'd you just see? And she said, well, starting last Wednesday, and you could see sort of our eyeballs bug out of our head like they do in the cartoons, or like, what? What do you mean last Wednesday? Why aren't you telling us what happened right here and right now? But for her, she wanted to add all the context to the point, to the end result of the story, the point of the story. But as a result, she would lose us before she ever got there, because she'd go through so much storytelling that maybe even by the end, we didn't even care who she saw anymore. We just wanted to get to the point. So storytelling can be a misdirection in communication. Another one, intellectualization. When one partner begins to intellectualize the issue, when they're not leading with their heart but only with their head, what happens is they begin to explain or justify what they did. Now, you tend to see this more in the more avoidant style than you do the anxious style, but this is one way where things can begin to break down and misdirection can happen in communication with your partner. So when we don't acknowledge the emotional aspects of a story, and we just see it purely from an intellectual standpoint where we're trying to solve the problem, and then we're trying to explain or even justify what's happening or how we would solve the problem or why we disagree, that can be misdirection as well, especially for the more avoidant style. Now, conversely, the more anxious style, they can bring up so many things at one time that it can overwhelm the partner. And I hear this a lot too, especially from my more avoidant style partners, where they'll say, look, we're talking, and she needs to get this stuff off her chest, and I get that, but she has so much that she talks about, I can't even address one point before she's moved on to the next point, or before he's ready to move on, and he throws so much at me, it completely overwhelms me that I don't even know where to begin. I couldn't even keep track or take notes. There's so much coming at me. So sometimes one partner can bring up so many things at one time that it becomes misdirection in communication, because there's no way for the other partner to be able to hone in on, say, look, what are we really talking about here? What's really the issue? Because there's so many things that are happening. And which leads us to the next one, and both partners and both attachment styles can do this. They can start bringing up things from the past. And this is a big one as well. This is misdirection, right? And whether it's intentional or unintentional, the intention often behind it is to try to make comparisons and to try to bring up a point from the past and compare it to a point that they're trying to now make in the future. But the problem is without being able just to stay in the here and now, and to really be able to focus on the issue at hand right here, right now, bringing up things from the past muddies the water. You know, it's like a crystal clear stream, and then you come and you just dump a bunch of mud into that stream, and pretty soon, because of the current, it starts to mix with that mud, and the next thing you know, it's no longer clear anymore. Downstream, it gets really muddy. And so bringing up things from the past muddies the water and is a misdirection in communication. We don't want to bring up things from the past. We want to be able to sit with whatever it is we're talking about right here and right now. Another thing that I see is mind reading or making assumptions. Now, our mind is automatically built to make meaning. So there's nothing your partner is going to say or do that you're not going to derive some kind of meaning from. But what we don't want to do is make the assumption that our meaning is 100% accurate. And so we can get into mind reading with our partner where we interpret something they say, and then we lock onto that interpretation as the absolute truth. And we need to be able to verify and clarify whether that's really true. Hey, what I hear you saying is it was really hurtful when you asked me to do the dishes and then came home and there was still a pile of dishes in the sink and I was sitting down relaxing, watching the game, and I hadn't done it yet. I could see where that was frustrating for you. Am I getting that right? as opposed to, man, it's no big deal. You're so controlling. Golly, I will do the dishes when I want to. Quit harping at me or whatever, right? Making the assumption that somehow she's controlling, you have to do it a certain way, as opposed to a relational interpretation of, wow, I could see where this would be frustrating. Her coming home, having asked me to do something, hoping that she has a reliable partner that will get things done in a timely manner, only to be disappointed by that. So we can mind read, we can make assumptions about what our partner's thinking and feeling, and we can lock onto those as the only interpretation of an event. And this can be a form of misdirection as well. And then the last thing, and this list by no means is exhaustive. There probably are other things where couples can misdirect and get caught down the rabbit hole. But the last one I see is the what if game, where they create these hypotheticals. Well, what if this? What if that? When a couple is in crisis, when their trauma has been triggered, that is not a good time at all to play the what if game, because it's a form of misdirection. It's going to move you further away. Oftentimes, it's a hypothetical that doesn't even matter anyway, but the person's trying to make a point, or they're trying to make, again, a comparison, and it, again, moves people away from the primary subject and moves people away from the real focus of the conversation. So what if games are fun when we're not caught in a cycle, when we're having a nice, relaxing time. Then you can play some hypothetical games with one another. Then you can create some of those scenarios, and they might be enjoyable. But bringing them up in a moment where we're trying to have a focused conversation about something is not the time to do that at all. So, okay, the question becomes, right, let's put this in a context of, well, how do we not misdirect in communication? How do we stick to the subject? How do we focus on what's most important? Well, first of all, I think it's important to set the stage. So make sure you choose the right time and the right place. When your partner's in the middle of, washing the dishes, or in the middle of gardening, or when they're upset and they're venting to you about their boss or a colleague or their sister or brother or whatever, that's not a time to bring things up. That is not a time when it seems stressed or anxious at all. That is not the time. So let's pick the right time and the right place. If they're sitting and reading, maybe go ask, hey, would this be a good time to talk for a few minutes? Or do you want to finish that page or the chapter? Or could I get a few minutes of your time? Or they're watching, something on TV. Hey, would now be a good time? Are you really bought into the show, or can we talk for a few minutes? So ask their permission. Try to set the right time and the right place to do that. Agree on some ground rules. So before you start, explicitly agree to stay on topic. It's going to be really important to avoid any of those misdirections that I just talked about. And then thirdly, can we define the issue clearly? Here's what I want to talk about. Can you define it in one sentence? You never help around the house, and I'm feeling overwhelmed with chores and would like to discuss how can we share the workload more evenly. This is what I would like to talk about. Clearly defined. You're not coming in and you're starting with last Wednesday, and then, well, I'm leading up to a point and you haven't even gotten my point yet. Or you start jumping in on one particular detail that they've talked about, and you start arguing that detail. That's a misdirection too. Talk about the point. Stick to the point together. Your conversations will go much better. All right, so what else can we do? Well, first of all, think about this like a parking lot for future discussions, right? So if a new issue comes up that isn't directly related to the current discussion, acknowledge it and suggest putting it in a parking lot to discuss later. Okay, I hear that was an issue for you, but that was something that happened last year. I really want to just stick to our ability to be able to share chores more evenly. Can we focus on this? And then we'll put that topic in the parking lot, and we will absolutely come back and discuss that. Because oftentimes, again, bringing something up from the past is misdirection. And I understand what the person's doing. They might feel a little pressure, a little stress. They might feel attacked. And so they bring up something similar that maybe they never brought up before as a comparison to like, why is this a big deal for you? That same thing happens to me and I don't bring it up, but that's a whole separate issue. That's not what we're originally talking about. So putting something in a parking lot is a good way for us to be able to come back to something else later. You can even write it down. Okay, this sounds like it's an issue for you. Let's write this down. We're going to put it in the parking lot for future discussion. But right now, can we stay with what we started? Another phrase you can use is, okay, well, back to the point. So if your partner starts storytelling, you can just say, okay, I understand that, but back to the point. So we can agree on some phrases that we can use that can signal us to get back to the original point. If you have made your point up front, if you say, look, this is what I want to talk about, then it's really easy to be able to say, okay, back to the point, because you've stated your point from the beginning. And so that's a phrase you can use to bring it back to where we are or where we need to be. Focus on solutions, not just complaints. I really want to understand how we can share the chores more evenly in the house. We both work. We both have stressful jobs. We both care for the kids. I am not minimizing the role you play in the family or how much you do for us, but I feel like a lot of the chores falls on me. And I'm wondering how we can discuss that in a way that we can find solutions. Is there something that you can think of or a way that would be helpful for us to be able to share these chores more evenly? So try to focus somewhat on solutions and not just complaints. Now, from my perspective, there is one caveat to this. Do not try to push for solutions until you both first agree on the problem. What I see too often is couples try to push for a solution to actually avoid the stress of the conversation itself. One partner wants to get away from the tension that's created by having this come up, by focusing on the problem, or maybe they don't even agree that it's a problem, and so they just sort of acquiesce, or they just sort of just give in. Okay, sure, yeah, no problem, whatever. And or they throw out a solution. Okay, I'll start doing more. Sure, no problem. Okay, yeah, can I get back to my game now? Or whatever it might be, as a way to actually avoid having the conversation. And they may not even agree on what the problem is. So unless there's some overlap between you and your partner, do not try to push for a solution until there's some overlap that we can agree that this is a problem, or at least till they acknowledge that it's a problem for you. If you're bringing it up, so they may not even see it the same way, but can they at least be able to say, yes, I see that you have an issue with this, and so because you have an issue with it, I'm willing to listen, and I want to know more about it. Can they at least agree that it's a problem for you, and they will take some kind of ownership to help you resolve it? Okay, something else. Be specific, not global. Don't say always and never, and don't say, yeah, I'll start helping more, no problem. That's not specific enough. Rather, okay, what days could we maybe split some chores and share? Do we need a specific time? Do I need to say, okay, by Sunday night at midnight, you'll do all your chores and I'll have all my chores done so that we can start the week clean, knowing that we've done both of our chores for that week, and then the next week it rolls over. And if you want to do all your chores on Tuesday night, you can do all yours and I won't say a thing because you're doing it in your time. But we can both agree that all chores will be done by X time and day of the week, something like that. And so the last thing I'll say is identify underlying needs, right? More often than not, the issue that's being brought up is a relational issue. It's not really always about the dishes. It's not really about the chores. It's not always about the child care or parenting issues or sexual issues. More often than not, what is being discussed is a relational issue. What I mean by that is we can start out with a certain topic, but what we're really talking about here is a relational need that's being unmet. When I come home and I see dirty dishes in the sink, and you're sitting there on the phone scrolling, and I've asked you 2 days in a row if you wouldn't mind cleaning the dishes, and you tell me yes, what what I feel like is I'm frustrated, not because the dishes aren't done, but because I feel like I have an unreliable partner to help. I feel like I've got a partner that I have no influence over, that when I ask for help in a certain area or with something to be done, it gets ignored. And so the real issue is a relational issue, not necessarily about the dishes. And so one of the misdirections I see a lot is where couples want to talk about the actual content rather than the context of what is happening. And if you can imagine a line in the middle of a sheet of paper, everything above that line is us talking about the dishes themselves, and everything below the line is us talking about how it impacts the relationship. And so when we identify our underlying needs, we want to make sure that what we're really talking about is what's happening at a relational level, because otherwise it can be misdirection. So make sure that we identify the underlying needs there so we're really able to communicate, hey, I think what's really going on for me and why I wanted to talk is I feel like I asked you for help around the house and I don't have a reliable partner, and I really want a reliable partner. Okay, well, I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to like and share and communicate with others about this particular podcast. If it's helpful to you, I'd really love for you to give it a rating as well so we can keep it coming to you and keep helping you work through your trauma in your life and in your relationships. Thank you so much. Have a good day.